You talked about how much there is a difference in understanding of how much Ukraine thinks it needs versus how much NATO and its allies and the US and everybody think that US needs in terms of arms and ammunition and defense technologies and systems. Um, that that unease. Can you talk about that unease? Is there a growing fatigue because with NATO and its allies, because this war is now extended into 10 months, and what will give, how will, because it's showing no sign of ending. This is going to be an endless stream, and Europe, many countries in Europe seem to be running out of weapons themselves in sort of supplying to Ukraine.
Well, this is, of course, a delicate subject, both politically and technically. Technically, because on every single military technology, you may have some issues related to how you have to educate staff members to operate with these technologies in terms of the ammunition that is needed for this kind of weapon that Ukraine might be asking for, the availability of both the weapon and the ammunition on the spot, not like in a year from now. All these issues, they play a role. And then there are political issues because on the part of many governments in Europe, but also in the United States, you have this worry that the regional conflict might just escalate beyond its current limits, also geographical limits, and directly involve other countries, which is a scenario that they want to avoid. So for that reason, they are still trying to be moderate in what they deliver, what they don't deliver. And indeed, if you take the abilities of the West, yeah, they are impressive in terms of military equipment, but they are not unlimited. They also need equipment for their own armies. They don't want to spend just everything they have. And in some areas, indeed, there's growing speculation that the resource of what could be delivered to another country without sort of depleting resources of their own armies is already on the brink of being totally used. So that is also one of the reasons to think twice when they are asked by Ukraine to deliver this or that. There's a pretty intensive debate currently between Ukraine and Germany, with Ukraine lobbying a German government to deliver main battle tanks, like a serious kind of battlefield weaponry, and Germany still hesitates, although it can be that they will make steps towards the Ukrainian demands a little bit later. In the US, you also have, on the one hand, just unprecedented amount of weaponry produced by the US military industries. You have them also benefiting in a way from these new orders. But on the other hand, this feeling that they have that if they just go all in with all the weapons that they have without proper preparation, without proper discussion with Ukraine, this might not produce the necessary effect, and then people would speculate about the US weapons being ineffective, useless. This is also sort of outcome that they would rather want to avoid.
All right, but tell me, because I know for sure. Let's talk about the sanctions, because apart from the weapons and the ammunition, there are also the sanctions on the Russian oil, which are starting to hurt Europe in significant ways. So we heard today there was a report that Poland and Germany, they had sort of requested for Russian oil, actually demanded Russian oil for 2023 for their fuel needs in 2023, and this is despite the sanctions being in place where they are. How do you see the oil sanctions impacting the willingness of the EU to back Ukraine all the way if this war extends for another few months or more?
Well, so far, when it comes to oil and gas, the sanctions on the EU side are not like blocking any trade with Russia. On the contrary, that is why for oil and gas, it was sort of one of the most complicated discussions on the EU side, because they actually need this kind of energy commodities. And this is still the case that they will need them in the foreseeable future, even if they make serious efforts to reroute the energy supply routes, and to change the energy balance in favor of renewables. Even with these efforts, they still need Russian energy commodities. And that's why the way that they chose is not blocking sanctions, not the sanctions that would just stop trade with Russia in this respect, but price caps. They are trying to introduce price caps to sort of avoid Russia profiting too much from this kind of trade, but Russia disagrees. Russia also tries to introduce price levels that it will not cross downwards, that it will not sell things cheaper than certain level, and this is currently the quarrel between Russia and the EU, like how to continue to, well, on the one hand, sell the energy commodities and get money that Russia is actually interested in. On the other, to get this energy that the EU is interested in. In Europe, indeed, you have certain countries that try to break the consensus within the EU. Most notably, Hungary is playing this role. But this is not new, and in the EU, you always have this very painstaking process of negotiations between the 27 members. And eventually, they very often, while they disagree a lot in process, eventually they come up with some consensual decision, because even the sanctions that are enforced, if you take just rhetoric on the part of Hungary or countries like Italy or some others, you could think that these countries, they would torpedo the sanctions regime against Russia a long time ago, but they didn't do that, because they are interested in the EU. They're interested in EU funds. They don't want the EU to break down, and this is one of the motivations. Then many of these countries, they value a lot dialogue with the United States, and also practical implications of this dialogue, like trade and also military cooperation. And they also have to listen to the position of the United States.